The stars are disappearing, and I know why. The night sky was clear above the McPherson Observatory, a canopy of stars stretching infinitely across the darkness. But I no longer found comfort in the familiar constellations. My name is Dr. Timothy Cole, senior astronomer, and I once considered myself lucky to spend my life peering into the mysteries of the cosmos. But that was before I found it, the thing that waits in the void, consuming all light, all hope. I record this log not for posterity, but as a warning. If you hear it, then what we found is no longer confined to the darkness between the stars. It has found its way here, and you must understand what that means. We thought we were prepared. We thought the James Webb Space Telescope would expand. Our horizons show us new worlds, and perhaps, just perhaps, offer a glimpse into the existence of other sentient life. I believed in those possibilities more than anyone. For decades, I've spent countless nights at the observatory, meticulously collecting data, hungrily analyzing the secrets each star held. And then, 3 weeks ago, we aimed the JWST at a distant point in the galaxy, a star labeled HD 1284. At first, it seemed unremarkable, just another pinprick of light hanging in the vast expanse. That is, until Sarah Brighton, my assistant, noticed something odd in the data. "Sir," she had said, voice tight with an edge of excitement, "there's an anomaly." I leaned over her workstation, my curiosity piqued. The screen showed HD 1284's light curve, a normally steady pattern, dipping sharply at regular intervals. Every 2 Earth days, the star's brightness would decrease by a noticeable percentage, as if something massive and opaque was crossing in front of it. Then, just as abruptly, the light would return to normal. My heart began to race. A discovery like this was what astronomers lived for. A new planet, potentially, or a binary star system with a hidden companion. But then Sarah's face twisted into a frown. It's not just the light curve," she said slowly, tapping at the keys. "I'm picking up fluctuations in the star's mass and temperature." That gave me pause. I leaned in closer, staring at the data feed in disbelief. The star wasn't just dimming. Its mass was fluctuating. That was impossible. Stars don't simply lose and regain mass like a balloon being inflated and deflated. "Run." "The calculations again," I ordered, my voice sharper than I intended. Sarah flinched but obeyed, fingers flying over the keyboard. We sat in tense silence, the hum of the equipment the only sound in the empty observatory. The numbers updated on the screen, confirming what we had already seen. The fluctuations were real. Something was siphoning energy and mass from the star. "It's like something's eating it," Sarah whispered. I recoiled at the suggestion, but I couldn't deny what the data suggested. I felt a chill creep down my spine, a sensation I hadn't experienced since I was a young researcher confronted by the unknowable depths of the universe for the first time. It wasn't awe or wonder this time. It was fear. "Let's not jump to conclusions," I murmured, more to convince myself than her. "There's got to be a natural explanation. Dark matter, gravitational lensing, something we're not considering." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained troubled. What if it's alive?" "Alive?" I scoffed, but the word lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. Stars are consumed all the time, by black holes, by neutron stars. But those are cold, mechanical processes. What she was suggesting was unthinkable, a predator that fed on stars like some cosmic parasite. Still, we had to know more. We spent the next week analyzing every bit of data we could pull from the JWST, rerunning simulations and cross-checking our findings with other telescopes. It was grueling work, the kind that would normally excite me. But every time we dug deeper, the answers we found only led to more disturbing questions. There were the dips in brightness, of course, growing longer and more pronounced, as if whatever was consuming the star was becoming more aggressive. The eye? Mass fluctuations were harder to quantify, but it became clear that the star was being stripped layer by layer of its outer shell. Then there was the temperature. As the star dimmed, its surface temperature dropped, a phenomenon that defied every known principle of astrophysics. Stars undergoing natural changes don't cool down like that, not unless their core energy is being sucked out. It was 2 weeks in when we got the first image. I'll never forget that moment. We'd managed to adjust the JWST's infrared capabilities to focus on a smaller area, hoping to capture whatever was causing the fluctuations. The screen flickered, pixels aligning as the image slowly rendered. I leaned in, my breath held tight in my chest, and, "God," Sarah whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. There, haloed by the dying light of HD 1284, was a shadow. No, not a shadow. A presence. A dark, amorphous mass, almost like a smear, of ink on the fabric of space itself. It was larger than a planet, nebulous and shifting, its edges blurring into the void. It seemed fluid, its form pulsing and rippling as if it were alive. My skin prickled. I stared, unblinking, as the thing undulated, extending long, sinuous tendrils toward the star. They wrapped around the blazing sphere, and the star flickered, its light swallowed by the darkness. It was as if the star itself were being smothered by an entity too vast and incomprehensible to grasp. "Jesus," I said, my voice barely audible. What the hell is that?" "Should we report this?" Sarah asked, eyes wide. I couldn't answer. I felt paralyzed, staring at the thing devouring a star millions of times larger than Earth. To send this to NASA, to let the world know what we'd found, would change everything. I could already imagine the headlines: Predator Star. Discovered. Unknown entity consuming stellar mass. But the implications. I couldn't help but feel that merely by observing it, by training our gaze on it, we were inviting its attention. "I need more data," I said finally, my voice hoarse. "If we report this now, they'll dismiss it as a glitch. We need to confirm. We need—" "What if it notices us?" Sarah interrupted, voice trembling. "Don't be ridiculous," I snapped, but the words rang hollow. Because deep down, in the part of me that had always been most attuned to the cosmos, I felt a presence staring back through the lens, something aware and malevolent. I turned off the monitor. "It's just a star," I muttered. "We're jumping at shadows." But even then, I knew it was a lie. I knew I would be back tomorrow, staring at that same screen, watching that same terrible thing feeding. Because something in the back of my mind whispered that we were no longer the observers. We were the observed. A knock on my office door startled me from my thoughts. The sudden intrusion felt like a physical shock after so many hours of solitary focus. I turned, bleary-eyed, to see Sarah standing in the doorway, her face pale and tight with worry. "Timothy," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "They're waiting for you in the conference room. Dr. Ramirez just arrived." I felt a jolt of adrenaline. I hadn't expected Elena to get involved so soon. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the director of the JWST project, was a formidable presence, brilliant, ambitious, and known for her no-nonsense approach. If she was here, it meant this was no longer a research curiosity. It was an emergency. "Right," I muttered, brushing my unkempt hair back and fumbling for my glasses. "Let's go." The walk to the conference room felt like traversing a dark, lonely chasm. The usual hum of activity in the observatory was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. I could feel the tension simmering in the air, the weight of too many sleepless nights bearing down on everyone. Something had shifted since our discovery of the feeder. It wasn't just the data or the unsettling images. It was the feeling that we were peering into something that should have remained hidden. The room was small, with the blinds drawn tight, a single table surrounded by grim-faced scientists. Elena stood at the head, her arms crossed. Beside her, Dr. Michael Yates, the observatory's chief physicist and my oldest friend, leaned back in his chair, staring thoughtfully at the blank screen in front of him. Opposite him was Dr. Ravi Singh, a cosmologist whose brilliance was matched only by his volatility. "Timothy," Elena said without preamble, fixing me with a sharp gaze as I took a seat. "Explain." I hesitated, glancing around the room. They were all waiting, their expressions a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled anxiety. I could feel Sarah's presence at my side. We were standing on the precipice of something monumental, and I wasn't sure if I could put it into words. "We've been monitoring HD 1284, I began, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. The fluctuations we detected in its brightness were unlike anything we've seen before. We initially thought it could be a planetary transit or some form of stellar instability, but it's not." I clicked a button on my laptop, and the monitor behind me flared to life, displaying the first image we'd captured of the entity. A murmur rippled through the room. "This is what's causing the anomaly," I said quietly, gesturing to the dark, sinuous shape coiled around the star. "We believe it's some kind of entity, siphoning mass and energy from HD 1284. It's feeding on the star." Dr. Singh let out a low whistle. "Feeding? You make it sound like it's alive." "I don't know if alive is the right word," I admitted, "but it's certainly behaving in a way that suggests purpose. We've ruled out gravitational lensing, dark matter, and any known astrophysical phenomena. Whatever this is, it doesn't follow natural laws." Elena narrowed her eyes. "What's its size?" "Roughly the mass of Jupiter, though it's hard to be precise. It doesn't have a consistent shape. It shifts, like a fluid." I paused, swallowing hard. "And it's getting bigger." "How?" Michael leaned forward, his expression intense. "Where is it drawing mass from?" "The star's outer layers," Sarah said, speaking up for the first time. Her voice trembled slightly. "It's like a parasitic organism, latching on and draining it. And it's not just light, it's consuming. The gravitational field around the star is warping in response, almost as if the entity is absorbing space-time itself." A heavy silence settled over the room. Ravi's gaze flickered between me and Sarah, his mouth set in a grim line. "Are you suggesting it's a form of dark energy?" he asked. "I'm suggesting," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "that we're dealing with something completely outside our understanding of physics. It doesn't behave like a physical object, yet it exerts physical influence. It's predatory." Michael laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "A predator star? Come on, Tim, that's absurd." "Is it?" I shot back, more forcefully than I intended. "Think about it. We've always assumed life to be bound by biological principles, but what if that's just a limitation of our perception? What if there are forms of life out there that don't fit our definitions? Forms that can thrive in the vacuum of space, that consume on a cosmic scale?" "Enough," Elena interrupted sharply. "We're not here to speculate. I want concrete. Data, Timothy. What is this thing? What are its capabilities? And most importantly, is it a threat?" I hesitated. Was it a threat? My instinct screamed yes, but I had no evidence to back up that fear. The feeder hadn't shown any aggression. It was just feeding. But there was something deeply unsettling in the way it moved, the way it reacted to the telescope's gaze. "There's more," I said softly. "When we focused the JWST on it, we detected a faint signal, a low-frequency hum that doesn't correspond to any known natural emissions." Ravi sat up straighter, his eyes sharp. "A signal? You didn't mention this before." I wasn't sure what to make of it, I admitted. "It's almost imperceptible, buried in the background noise, but it's rhythmic, structured. Almost like communication?" Michael asked, his skepticism giving way to a glimmer of something darker. "Fear." "Yes," I whispered. "Or a lure." Elena's gaze hardened. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to continue. "What if this isn't the first star it's consumed? What if it moves from one stellar system to another, draining stars of their energy? And what if the signal we picked up is a beacon, a way to attract other sentient beings like us to come and investigate? And then it devours them." "Two," Ravi finished quietly, his face pale. "That's insane," Michael muttered, shaking his head. "Stars die all the time. Supernovae, black holes." "Not like this," I interrupted. "Not this deliberately. I don't think it's just consuming the star. It's baiting us, drawing us in." Another heavy silence fell over the room. I could see the disbelief on their faces, the struggle to reconcile what I was saying with everything they knew about the universe. But there was something else, too. A flicker of doubt, of dread. Because if I was right, how long do we have? Elena asked, her voice flat. I stared at her, uncomprehending. What do you mean? She looked at me as if I were a child. If it's aware of us, if it's hunting, how long until it finds us? A shiver ran through me. I hadn't thought that far ahead. The idea of the feeder shifting its gaze from HD 1284 to Earth was too terrifying to contemplate. But as I opened my mouth to respond, Sarah let out a choked sound, her eyes wide with horror. Dr. Cole! Look at the screen. We turned as one. The image on the monitor had changed. The feeder, that dark, indefinite mass, was still coiled around the star. But it was no longer passive. It had shifted, its tendrils extended, reaching out as if it were searching. And then, slowly, deliberately, it twisted. The star's light flared and dimmed again, a rhythmic pulse that sent a chill down my spine. It was looking back, at us. It knows, I whispered. The room exploded into chaos. My descent into obsession began that night. The chaos of the meeting quickly subsided, but the fear never left. We went our separate ways, each struggling to grasp what we had witnessed. Dr. Ramirez immediately ordered a lockdown on all research involving HD 1284, restricting access to the telescope and data files. No one was to discuss it, document it, or, God forbid, leak it to the public, but I couldn't stay away. I spent the following days holed up in my office, staring at the high-resolution images we'd captured of the feeder. I analyzed and reanalyzed the signal, listening to its rhythmic pulse until it was burned into my brain. There was something there, something hidden beneath the surface, just waiting to be uncovered. Sarah pleaded with me to take a break, to get some sleep, but I brushed her off, consumed by the need to understand. What was it? How did it move? Why did it feel like it was aware of us? I found myself waking up in a cold sweat every night, dreams haunted by shadowy tendrils coiling around stars, snuffing out their light. It was as if the feeder was creeping closer, inching its way through the black void toward me. Each time I woke, gasping and shivering, I would rush back to the observatory, needing to confirm that it was still out there, still confined to the distant reaches of space. And yet, every time I looked, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had moved. One night, I intercepted something new. I was reviewing the star's emission spectra, trying to pick out any anomalies, when I noticed a faint spike, a barely perceptible fluctuation in the background noise. I leaned closer. It was the same signal we'd picked up before, only different. There was a new rhythm to it, a secondary pulse that reverberated through the first. I ran it through the analyzer, isolating the frequencies, and stared in disbelief as a pattern emerged. It was mimicking our attempts to communicate. "Sarah!" I called out, my voice hoarse from days of disuse. I hadn't spoken to anyone in what felt like an eternity, lost in the world of data and static. But she was there, she was always there, lingering on the edges, watching me with those worried eyes. She appeared in the doorway, a ghostly figure in the dim light. Her face was thinner, drawn, as if she hadn't been sleeping either. I wondered if she too was feeling it, the pull of the feeder, the irresistible urge to look deeper. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "Listen," I whispered, turning the speakers up. The signal played softly, a low, haunting hum that seemed to vibrate through the air. It was hypnotic, almost melodic in its complexity, and I felt a strange comfort wash over me as I listened. It was the first time in weeks that I didn't feel afraid. "Is that new?" she asked, stepping closer. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "It's responding to us," I finally managed. "Every time we've sent a signal, every time we've tried to analyze it, it's been listening. And now..." I pointed to the screen, where the twin pulses throbbed in perfect synchronization. It's mimicking our frequency. It's trying to communicate. Sarah stiffened beside me. Or it's learning. The word sent a shiver through me. Learning, mimicking, adapting. What if it wasn't just responding out of curiosity? What if it was studying us, figuring out what made us tick, the way a predator studies the movements of its prey? What do we do? She whispered. I turned to her, seeing the fear etched in her face, and felt a surge of protectiveness. She was too young for this, too innocent. She didn't deserve to be drawn into the same madness that had ensnared me. We can't. Stop now, I said softly. We're too close. We need to keep watching, No, she interrupted, shaking her head violently. We need to stop, Timothy. This thing is manipulating us. Can't you feel it? Her voice broke, and she grabbed my arm, fingers digging into my flesh. Every time we look at it, every time we send a signal, it's like it's reaching out, like it's wrapping itself around us. I wrenched my arm free, anger and frustration bubbling up. You're overreacting. It's a phenomenon, a discovery. This is what we do, Sarah. We study. We learn. Not this, she murmured, stepping back, her face pale. This isn't science, Timothy. This is... She trailed off, glancing around as if the shadows in the room were listening. It's hungry. The word echoed in the silence, hanging heavy in the air. Hungry. I wanted to laugh, to brush it off as paranoia, but something deep inside me recoiled. Was that what this was? Had we awakened something that shouldn't have been disturbed? Something that was growing stronger the more we probed its secrets? I'm going to talk to Dr. Ramirez, she said suddenly, her voice wavering. This needs to stop. I surged to my feet. No, you can't. She'll shut it all down. We need more time, more... Look at yourself, she cried, eyes blazing. You're falling apart. You don't eat. You don't sleep. You've become a slave to this thing, whatever it is. If we keep going, we'll what? I snarled, fists clenched. We'll understand. We'll finally see? Or we'll go mad, she whispered. The words were soft, barely audible, but they cut through me like a knife. Please, Timothy, let it go. I stared at her, chest heaving, and for a moment, just a moment, I considered walking away, letting the darkness swallow up the feeder and forgetting we ever looked into the abyss. But then the signal pulsed again, throbbing through the room, and my resolve hardened. I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close. You do what you want, I muttered, turning back to my laptop. But I'm staying. She was silent for a long time, and I refused to look at her. I couldn't. If I did, I might waver and turn back. I'm sorry, she whispered finally, and I heard the soft click of the door closing behind her. I didn't see her again for 3 days. I kept working, alone in the silent observatory. I slept in my office, surrounded by screens filled with data feeds and looping video of the feeder's dark, undulating mass. I ate when I remembered to, hardly tasting the cold sandwiches and stale coffee I scrounged from the break room. Time, blurred, days and nights melding into a single, endless vigil. And all the while the feeder watched. It wasn't just paranoia. I could feel it. Every time I adjusted the telescope, every time I narrowed the focus to get a clearer image, it would shift, its tendrils flaring outward, reaching toward the lens. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew what I was seeing. It was reacting to me. It was responding, and it was getting closer. The thought made my skin crawl, but I couldn't look away. I stayed glued to the screens, cataloging every flicker, every movement, every tiny variation in the signal's pattern. It was speaking to me. I was sure of it. There was a message buried in the hum, a meaning just beyond my grasp. I was close. So close. Then, on the third night, it happened. I was running the latest batch of images through the analyzer when the signal suddenly spiked, a sharp burst of energy that sent my equipment whirring in alarm. I scrambled to adjust the settings, and watched as the feeder's dark mass seemed to expand, swallowing the star completely. The room vibrated with a low, thrumming hum, the sound reverberating through my skull. I gasped, clutching the edge of the desk, my vision blurring as the signal intensified. It was everywhere, filling the room, the observatory, the entire world. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I blinked. The screens went dark, the equipment falling silent. I stared at the blank monitors, my mind racing. What the hell just happened? The silence stretched on for what seemed like an eternity. Then finally I reached out, trembling fingers hovering over the keyboard.